Okay, so I just bought this 2008 Lexus GX 470, and as you see, it has the ancient cassette deck in here. So my first thought was, oh, not a problem, I can replace it. But after some research, I realized that this is not an easy task because the climate control is integrated into the unit. All this is one, and everybody says it can't be done. So as I found, there's a company called Beatsonic USA that has an adapter that will allow us to do this. So if everything goes well, by the time I'm all done, we should have a new aftermarket radio in here with all the latest bells and whistles, which I'll show you, and we should have the steering wheel controls working, as well as XM radio, Sirius XM radio. I'm also going to replace this auxiliary port, which I won't need anymore, with a USB adapter, one that'll be from the radio that powers it, so I'll be able to run the audio on there, and then another powered one that I'll tap off the cigarette lighter and get that one. So hopefully all will go smooth. One thing we probably will do is skip the teardowns because there's plenty of videos out there and all the wiring. I've pre-wired some of the assemblies to make this a little bit easier. So hopefully this all goes smooth. Okay, I'm going to show all the components that we're going to use to replace the factory radio in the Lexus GX 470. And I'm going to start with the radio. This is a Kenwood KMM X503 radio. No CD in this, but it has everything I need. It has audio streaming. It'll have voice calling. It has Sirius XM radio, HD radio, pretty much your basic, radio nowadays. So I mentioned Sirius, so I'm going to put the Sirius XM module in there as well. So Sirius is going to be hooked up. I do have an antenna and satellite capabilities, but I can't use that, so I have to go to one of these aftermarket Sirius models. When I do this, I'm going to lose my auxiliary port in the center console. In the dash, I'm going to replace it with a USB. So when we're all done, we will have a USB, and this particular one has an audio port and it has a charge port. The audio port is powered by the stereo, and I'll use the rear USB cable and plug into it, and then I just have to tap power in order to get the charge portion. I also want to retain my steering wheel controls, so part of doing that is using this module. This is the Axxess module. This is the ASWC-1, and this retains the factory steering wheel controls. It is my understanding I'll probably lose the push to talk button, but that's okay. I don't use that anyway. We'll see when it's all hooked up what works and what doesn't. And finally, the star of the show is this module from Beatsonic. Beatsonic USA provides the wiring harness that makes all this possible. It allows you to keep your climate control in the nav unit, keeps the navigation, everything there should function. My only thing I'm going to lose is the 6-disc CD changer in the glove box. I'm not concerned about that, and potentially the push to talk button. So after I'm done, I should be able to demonstrate everything working. But these are all the components, and now I'm going to start unboxing. Okay, so the first thing I opened up is the steering wheel controls. The steering wheel controls has a couple cables that came with it. This is the wiring harness that hooks in here, and basically there's instructions that'll tell me what to do. There's also this control box module to hook it up. Beatsonic, since I bought this through them and not Crutchfield, also included this extra adapter. And if everything goes well and I have this plug, then I should only have to hook this up and do a minimal set of wiring, which will basically only be wiring the steering wheel controls to my head unit. So that's actually one thing I didn't mention. It's very important that your head unit has stereo controls. Okay, now let's open up the module from Beatsonic. Now they had sent me a lot of instructions, and they're very helpful when you ask questions. And this is the module. So this all hooks into the factory wiring harness. And this hooks into your speakers. Just one thing of note, you only hook up the front speakers in here because the Mark Levinson sound system will actually do all the distribution of the power. So you're only going to give the front speakers, which simplifies it. Okay, let's open the box of the USB and see what this is. Well, we have the port. It's important to note this is for Toyota. It's a Toyota port. I did measure and everything does match. It gives you the measuring instructions here. Since it's in the electrostatic packaging, I'm not going to open it until tomorrow when I'm ready to install it. This is our Kenwood unit. Has a cord for the microphone, has the USB cord. This is what I'm going to use to run to the port. So I have the audio port controlled by here. I have the microphone, and I plan to stick the microphone above the steering wheel, so it's, you know, you're talking at it. Here's our wiring harness, which is pretty straightforward and simple. There's not a lot here to this. I'll probably get started on connectors and whatnot before I go to the car. You know, just stuff that, you know, basic things that you can look up anywhere. Solder some wires wherever I can solder, and then use connectors. I did note that the Beat Sonic adapter did provide connectors for the speakers, and I will cap off and basically shrink wrap the ones I'm not going to use. Okay, one important thing that we want to note is the sound should be set to everything being neutral. So you want your treble, your mid, your bass, your front and rear all to be in the midpoint before you do this. The other thing I read is that you want to have the volume set to the midpoint, which for me is going to be 32. I'm not going to blast that now, I'll do that later, but I'm going to set the volume as well before we shut down. Okay, now that we've got the dash torn apart and the radio disconnected, we're going to take out the old factory radio. That just is 8mm bolts holding on the bracket, and then we'll replace that with the new radio. Okay, I decided it was probably easier to take the head unit out of the car in order to remove the radio, because you got to take off the brackets. There's some clips, some screws that are hard to get at, but this should make it easier because all the wiring harnesses will connect up. You know, it's pretty straightforward how to reconnect them. So to remove this, there's 2 screws and 2 8mm heads right here that you need to take out. Same thing on the other side. I've pre-loosened these, so this will come right off. And then once it's off, I'll show you what I've got. Kenwood radio ready to go. One thing that came with the kit, the MVA 8100, is a couple plastic fins that go on the outside here because it'll fill the space in the radio. All right, so the receiver went in pretty easily. I used the panhead screws that came with the head unit. Everything looks like it's in there nice and snug. The trim's around, the spacers fill out pretty well. Now it's time for the real fun, the wiring harness. Okay, it looks like it should be pretty straightforward for the initial wiring with the MVA 81. All these will plug directly into the wiring harness on the back of the car, so this should make things pretty easy. The steering wheel controls will be a little bit more challenging, but I think we can figure that out. Okay, so I figured out how to hook up the steering wheel control modules. Fortunately, it wasn't too bad. There were only 3 wires I had to splice. You can see my less than stellar tape job, but I would really rather use a POSIX wire tap. I didn't have one. I'm not a big fan of those cheap wire taps that can cut the wire. So what I did is used what is called a military wire tap, where I split the wire, the insulation, put a hole in it, wrapped the wire around it, and then taped it up. So that's our splices. It was really only 3 wires, and then I still have to do the power. But otherwise it's ready to go. And then I also had to hook one up to the wiring harness, which I was able to solder on there. This is the stereo wiring harness. I was able to solder on there and heat shrink. The other one isn't used and was taped off. Well, it required disassembling almost the whole console, but I got my little charging port to fit in here. So now it's a matter of getting the wiring set up. Okay, so we have everything assembled in the head unit. We've run all the wires. We ran the microphone for the Bluetooth audio, or for the hands-free calling. Ran the wire for the Sirius XM, and have everything in the back. So I'm going to show you kind of how this all works. So the hard part really is finding, where to hook up certain things, but following the instructions made it pretty easy to hook up this wiring harness. So if you look in the back now, I have my Sirius XM here, which we don't care about because it just plugs in. I had to jump some wires here. There were 3 pretty easy instructions. The rest of them I heat shrinked and taped. All the wiring harnesses are hooked up with the connectors given. Anything that wasn't was just taped off, well, heat shrinked. At the end of the day, these are just going to plug right into these connectors. And I'm going to put this all back in. This is my steering wheel controls, which goes to this module here. We'll plug that in. So when all this is plugged into the car and the battery connected, we should be in business with everything working. Alright, we're at the point now of connecting this, and it's just a matter of now connecting this back to the factory wiring harness, and then, really cleaning up this maze of rat's nest of wires, which I'll do later. But here's see, I got some battle wounds, which always happens when reaching through the cars. These all just plug right in. Let's see if I can find the other part to the harness. Oh, here it is. And then I have to hook up my grounds, and once I have the grounds hooked up, I should be able to assemble this back together, and hopefully we have things working. Okay, we have connected the battery. This is actually test 2, so it's very important to test. The steering wheel controls were not working. Now I will go to accessory, and we will see the head unit powers up. The radio is powering up. I have my nav. I have my climate control. And once I get the radio going, so now let's turn this on. And I do have Sirius XM.
All the forces of darkness couldn't stop.
And as we see, Sirius is coming up. I haven't subscribed yet, but we'll do that later. I'll turn this down a little bit. If I do the volume on the steering wheel, it works. If I change channels, it changes the channels. If I do the mode, I can cycle through the various modes from the steering wheel controls. I haven't tried the phone yet. Let's see if those phone buttons work. So hopefully when I get a phone call, my phone will work.
And then calling.
Okay, I have a call coming in. I'll see if I can answer it from the steering wheel controls. Well, I can cancel it, I can hang up, but apparently one of them isn't working. Maybe it never worked, I don't know. Never tried it before with this car. So it looks like everything's functional. Now I just have to put everything back together. As you note, you can see down here I do have my audio and charger. The only problem is I still have a couple wires hanging because I have to find my power source for that. But the wires are there, so once I tap that, I should be in good shape. All right, well, this is the final product. We are finished. The stereo works. All the controls on the steering wheel work, with the exception of the pickup button. But honestly, I don't know if that ever worked before I started. The only thing I still have yet to hook up is the power for the charge. But I do get audio there, so I can charge, and I have audio on one port, and I do have USB on the front. So I am good to go. Beat Sonic, you did it. This module saved me. The one caution I will tell everybody is read the instructions carefully. My steering wheel controls did not work at first because I neglected to ground. I only connected the ground to the wiring harness and not to the chassis ground. Once I grounded it, that picked up and everything started working. So there you have it.